I'm with Javier. I know I couldn't have made it through the psyop. I'd have walked out and said, just shoot me. Just turn that off because I'm out. Welcome to the What's Our Verdict TV podcast, where we fashion ourselves television judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with two of my co-hosts, Javier Ortiz.
What is up, my nerds?
And Ian Anderson.
Some shit.
And back with us today is our special guest host, Nicole Ortiz.
What's up?
Everybody make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you also leave us a 5-star review and check out our sister podcast, What's Our Verdict Movies, where we review and pass judgment on your favorite movies and ours. Today, we're going to be concluding our review of the miniseries Waco, which is available now on Netflix. We will be reviewing episodes 4 through 6 today. Just like last time, we'll read a synopsis of the episode and discuss it. So let's just jump right in, guys. I'll go hop right into the episode 4 synopsis, and then we'll talk about it. After the first attempt of evacuating the Branch Davidians from Mount Carmel failed, Nosner suggests a new sensible plan to get the children out first safely, while other FBI agents prefer to use force, fearing that David Koresh and his followers would commit mass suicide. Koresh preaches to his remaining sect members that he'll wait for a sign from God and warns that the kingdom of heaven is coming, but he faints midway into the sermon. Nosner and fellow agent Walter Graves then focus their attention on Steve Schneider, who turns out to be the star recruiter. The shrinking food and water supplies and the lack of proper medical attention test the faith and patience of Davidians and FBI, respectively. David Thibodeau buries Perry Jones's body in the front yard instead of the bunker at Michelle's request. And Steve contacts Nosner asking for milk because the mothers have stopped lactating. However, Nosner recommends adding listening bugs to the gallons so they'll have ears inside the compound. Throughout, Nosner's trickle method seems to work as few Davidians left the complex, including a few kids. Later, the Koresh family, with help from Steve, send their videotape to the FBI, blaming the government for the fatal attack. As parents beg their loved ones to walk out, electricity to the facility has been cut, leaving Koresh and the Davidians in the dark. Ready, set, fight. No. So, that's episode 4. Let's talk about it. What'd you guys think?
Well, I think my first thought was cow milk and breast milk aren't the same thing.
I think we both thought that it was just interesting that they asked for, when they were asking for milk, or they were like, are they asking for donated breast milk, or are they asking for cow's milk? And it ended up being just, so right off the bat, they just asked for cow's milk. We're like, interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, I'm not an expert, but like, I don't know what kind of nutritional value does cow milk give to a baby who's nursing?
To answer your question, the nutritional value is very different, but it's still better than nothing. And you know, babies need something. And at this point, I think even if the narrative wasn't being controlled, or if these folks weren't actually crazy, whichever one was true, or maybe both were true. But anyway.
They could have asked for formula.
Yeah, why didn't they bring formula? I just think like 6 gallons of milk is just an interesting response to that. I don't get that.
You know who I think's crazy?
Hitler.
Is David Thibodeau he's fucking nuts too. But no, David Thibodeau for taking a fucking dead body out there and burying it by a tree in front of a bunch of fucking tanks and people that are already proven they're willing to shoot some guns.
After they gunned some dude down who's trying to run into the compound.
Which, that didn't actually happen the way it was portrayed.
The burying part? No,
the guy running in to join them.
Oh, what happened there?
So there was 3, my understanding, well, I'd have to go find the sources, but my understanding, there were 3 Davidians that came in, and like 2 of them took off, but one of them stayed and like was exchanging fire with them. And then as the ATF agents were retreating. So I was a little upset, like learning that when...
Wait, the ATF agents were retreating and a Davidian was still shooting at them?
No, the Davidian that was trying to get onto the compound was shooting.
Oh, that's messed up.
So, and there were like a couple of times...
As self-defense? Or he just decided to just take his one gun against all those ATF agents that are sitting outside the house?
I mean, I can't speak to who was shooting first and all that.
Because that would be crazy.
Gunfire started. It was gunfire is mayhem. It's chaos. I don't know. I don't know how it played out exactly. What I'm saying is there's like a couple of points where I don't like the way that it was filmed. For instance, there's one where they're talking about the milk, and the very next scene they go to is Gary Nosner, I don't know which it is, and his like little companion negotiator, and they're talking about bacon and whether or not they should have gotten bacon on their burgers. And I just didn't like that they would take like little shots that didn't really matter, but it made it feel like they had a particular viewpoint in the series rather than trying to come at it from like an unbiased view. But I don't know, just something that bugged me.
Good to know the truth, though, that there was some very different than how it was portrayed. And I think that gets to the root of my issue with, and I'll just get this out. I don't think I even said it in the last one. Me and docu anything have a hard time because any facts can, or any concepts, facts can be swayed or portrayed in a certain way in order to sway one way or the other. That's why I try to stay as in the middle as possible, because I realize that while there's truth in these things, it's hard to find pure fact in a situation like this, right? So
yeah, I think too, especially when with this one where Javier, I know you can maybe shed some more light on this, but Javier tried to look up a lot of information on how the trial went and what was found in court, who shot first or this or that. And it seems pretty controversial on either end. So yeah, when we were watching this, I made the point that it'll be interesting to talk about, kind of have to talk about the storyline as we watched it in the documentary, as that, taking those facts, a little bit with a grain of salt, because we can't be 100% sure what's exactly true and what they may have embellished, or what kind of perspective they might be pushing or wanting to portray. So there definitely is a line there with docu anything, right? Like you were saying, JJ. So for me, what I think what this docuseries I think did for me, and I think they did this very well, is to show that the Davidians and people involved in this situation were real people, and to kind of combat the extremist viewpoint of the media against the Davidians, to show that these are sober, faithful people who believed in this small religion. And that's not to say that David Koresh was the most benevolent and perfect human. That he obviously had his issues because he believed he was a Messiah, and whether he was knowingly malicious in manipulating people, or he truly, something was going on upstairs and he really, truly, truly believed that God was speaking to him, that he was a prophet, that he was a Messiah. Whatever is true of David Koresh, those people, to me, I think the documentary just brought out that these were just good, believing people, and something that kind of got them into a sticky situation, that they weren't just like crazy people trying to kill themselves in front of the government for a weird cult, that they're people. So.
Yep, there's truth on all sides, unfortunately. We definitely have to, it's one of those things where the truth is what you make of it, right? So it's a tough piece with this one. Ian, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that, and I agree with Nicole, like what's so frustrating, and you, JJ, when you talk about something, I think what's so frustrating for me watching this is my inability to find out the truth. Like they're even just like trying to Google and search through the trials and all the different information that's out there. There is no, this is exactly what happened. And that's really frustrating to me. And I don't do well when there's not an answer, especially to a complex situation that's very emotionally charged like this one. So I think that's one thing to be prepared if viewers haven't, or listeners haven't already watched this, to be prepared for, like emotionally, that you're going to hit this spot where either you have to just make up your mind what you think happened, or you have to accept that there's no definitive answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Can't quibble with small details, because who really knows the truth there? Although I do think that it was really cool that they used both to base this docuseries. It was based off of David Thibodeau's book, from the perspective of inside the house, the Davidians, and then kind of the outside government aspect, FBI, ATF perspective from David Nosner's book, his time as a, FBI negotiator. So I think that they did a really cool, I said this in the last podcast, I really like that they followed those two narratives because it gave a really awesome perspective on both sides.
Yeah, I'm very interested to read the books. To be honest, I'd like to see a little bit more of that because I'm sure that even they use the books for like the basis of the narrative. There's probably some artistic license in there that I'd really like to read the actual perspective of those people. So, all right, let's move on to episode 5. Here's the synopsis. Over a week into the stalemate, Gary Nosner and his boss, Tony Prince, are at odds with each other on how David Koresh and the Branch Davidians should be handled. Kathy Schroeder, upon seeing footage of her son Danny, leaves the compound to be with him, but immediately Brad Branch follows that after Koresh catches him drinking. Another week later, a frustrated Nosner snaps at colleagues Prince and Decker for continuing with their aggressive maneuvers after Koresh complains of armored tanks driving around their property. Tensions escalate as sect members feel the strain from the impasse. Over the phone, Nosner, in a reasonably calming tone, begs Koresh to level with him. At another press conference, Belinda David Thibodeau's mom demands that she and other families in attendance intervene. Just as everything was settling down, Decker cuts their power off again and uses bright lights and a barrage of nuisance noises from their sound system as a way to flush the Davidians out. However, Wayne Martin powers on the generator, then Koresh and Thibodeau use it to their advantage to counter the annoyance. This is the episode where I've really, the whole episode, I was extremely uncomfortable. And I think it kind of goes back, it's kind of why I started the conversation of none of us know what's true and what's not, unless you were there, because there's so many things that happen that without some sort of confirmation, to me, I look at this and go, it's a whole lot of artistic license to make you feel one way or another.
It even seems like if you were there, you still don't have the whole story, right? Because there's so much going on and it was such a big compound. Because there's even discrepancy about the Davidians who survived and the ATF agents about what happened. And anyway, that's a really hard part.
Yeah. And the crazy part is the people that I really felt bad for throughout this episode and even episode 6 to a part of it is, and episode 4 is the families of the people that aren't in the compound of these people that are.
Yeah.
David Thibodeau, obviously, and David Koresh's moms are the two big characters that they run in front of your face the most and use for that tension. But man, I'm sure there was even more people out there just worried about the people that were in the compound and what was going on.
This episode was really crazy for me because there was so much going on, but it did kind of open the dialogue for me of maybe the Davidians. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. Seeing the perspective of the Davidians, that they really, if facts are, if it's being portrayed even remotely close to what it is, that them feeling like you are coming to my house and you are driving your tanks around my stuff, you're driving over my crap, and you're doing all of these things without a good reason, besides you just want us to come out right now. I don't know. I just felt like there was a lot of things in that episode where I felt if the Davidians really were kind of playing music at them to kind of retaliate a little bit, I feel like I'm kind of on their side with their reasoning. Excuse me, you're going to have to be nice to me. You're on my property and you're, and it definitely made me feel for Gary in his conversations with the Davidians. Several times he will express to them look, I want what's best for you guys, but I can't just go over there and tell them, stop doing that, because this is not who I am working with. You have to understand their entire mindset, the way that they approach these issues is not something that I can just break down to nothing. So I thought that was really interesting to follow.
Dude, I would have given up during that PsyOps thing with the huge speakers and the bright lights.
I don't think you would.
Dude, not sleeping for 3 days.
I don't think you would.
I would throw in the towel.
Because, like, at this point, and somebody can, like, correct me if I'm wrong, they're trying to get those people out so that when they go in there to find those guns, if something violent happened, that as few people as possible would be hurt in that altercation. Yes?
Yeah, I think so.
I think for the purposes of this podcast, we got to make, at least a few assumptions. And I think it's right to say, we can't be 100% positive because we just watched this docuseries. And of course, it doesn't show every single piece of evidence and that, not every single fact in there is 100% true. I think it's fair to say that, but we have to make some assumptions so that we can have something.
Yeah, and the TV show does a great job of making a lot of assumptions for us, and then we get to build on those. So definitely some fun things happening when it comes to the telling of the story on either side.
Yeah, because I think, whether the facts are absolutely correct or the way that it's portrayed is 100% the way it was. And, of course, like we said, we'll never know that. I think that the story, the way that it was portrayed in the docuseries raises some questions whether or not those are true to this actual scenario. I think there are a lot of issues that it brings up that I think that everyone can agree with happen in real life. Like, the, overstepping of government entities or law enforcement agencies. So if we were to take just what happened in the docuseries at face value, just as a story, I think there are some really interesting conversations to have. And I think that this episode in particular, bringing up, whether psyops were necessary, whether the Davidians were validated in the way that they retaliated, and whether the ATF was validated in not only them being there, but the way that they responded to the Davidians kind of asking for more time and seemingly drawing out their previously agreed on arrangements, whether that was valid. I think this episode, again, whether it is a true story, a fictional story, brought up some really cool, maybe not cool, but really interesting dilemmas, which I think extend further into the sixth episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you there, Nicole. A lot of crazy, crazy shit on either side. To your point, a lot of concessions being asked for, a lot of concessions being denied, and then some crazy shit. And I'm with Javier. I know I couldn't have made it through the PSYOP shit. I'd have walked out and said, just shoot me. Just turn that shit off because I'm fucking out.
No, my point was, I don't think actually in real life, well, maybe it would bring out a different side of Javier, but I feel like you're one to, like, hold your ground on principle. Like, you came to my house, you really shouldn't be here. You are doing things, that are way beyond.
I think I'm stubborn. I just don't think I'm that stubborn.
You don't think you're that stubborn?
No.
I think you would hold out for a while.
I think I'm stubborn, but I'm weak. Like, I just don't have the mental fortitude to be as stubborn as I want to be.
I think that Koresh, though, at least in the docuseries, showed a lot of, like, we're holding our ground, and it kind of, he was saying that it's because because of God and because of the religion that he has, but you could definitely see that it was bleeding over to his own personal belief that, why are they here? They shouldn't be here. This is my property. We weren't doing anything wrong. And so as a leader, do I believe that that's a good enough reason to make everybody stay and risk their lives? No. But as a person, I could feel for that personal, like, get out of here. This is my house. What are you doing here? You're coming in with your tanks doing things, the psyops just to get us out because you don't like our timetable for really trying. If you're truly, truly wanting us to all be safe in this situation, you guys will back off and give us some more time or some more leeway. I don't know.
It did seem like it turned into a dick measuring contest.
It did, at that point, especially when they were blaring their music.
Yeah, it's like, well, we flex on you, and then David Koresh tries to flex back. It's just so stupid. It's like an ego thing. Yeah, the whole entire time Gary's over here, like, they're not going to respond to this force because of their beliefs. They're just not going to respond. And I thought that was really cool to watch that play out as Gary is
basically telling the truth that the things that you guys are doing, ATF, FBI, not going to work on these people. And they didn't. And it's sad that they just continued to ignore him even into the next episode.
Yeah, the leadership on both sides in this and the next episode frustrate the shit out of me because it's like, it's kind of like how we said, dick measuring contest, but it's like, I'm going to one up you at every chance I can, to the point that, like, and I don't know, again, this may be, I'm sure it's dramatized to a certain degree, but the man uses a source of power that for 30 minutes he could have done something that would help his people, and instead they fucking play music out the window.
Dude, I had a problem with that too, but I couldn't like put my finger like on it. But I'm like, really, is that the best use of that?
Yeah, like seriously, you could have used that thing to generate, get your, well, it didn't have running water, but you could get the fridge working again for like a half an hour. I mean, you could have done
some cell phones.
Seriously, you could have done any number of things with this power, and you decide to be an ass clown and play music really loud to get back at the FBI for their music and their shit being loud. I was like, that's pretty petty. And if again, this is another situation where, look, I don't have the willpower that these people obviously did. Because let's be honest, as soon as the shit started shooting and they're like, ceasefire, you can come out, I'd have been like, I'm good. I'm coming out. Send me to jail. Fucking quit shooting at my ass. I'm just coming outside. And in this situation, I'd done this. And I'd have walked up and punched David Koresh in the face and been like, are you fucking serious right now? You're going to play music just to be a dick when you could use that power for any number of helpful things within our compound? Now that they've cut the power. Yeah, it irritated me. But on the flip side, the FBI is just as bad. You sit there and, they do something shitty, or they're obstinate about not coming out, and they up the game of how can we make their lives more miserable? How can we do one more thing to try? And granted, they do it under the purpose of trying to get them out in a peaceful-ish manner. But still, you don't have to go to those extremes. You can try to find a human side of all this and be reasonable and smart. And it just seemed like whatever truth there is in both sides of these stories, it seems like there was very little reasonable thought process from the top down and on either side.
I have a question for Ian, since you're like our research guru. Did the
don't know about that.
Did the conversation, actually this might not be this episode, but the conversation with the radio host, like via the satellite, like rotating it, was that a thing?
I tried looking that up and I couldn't find anything specific to the like radio host and satellite. What I found was that the David Koresh's mother hired a lawyer for David, and I think that's how the lawyers got in. But I couldn't find anything on the radio host conversation because I was curious about that too. The other thing that I had, and I don't know if there's an answer to this, but what did they like find the listening bugs? Because that was in the last episode, but then it's not used.
They never resolved that.
Oh yeah,
used in like the other two, and I feel like that would be a really useful source of information with this thing ongoing. And I don't know if anybody has information on that or not, but I was kind of curious why those weren't continued to be used, and I would love for there to be those tapes available to listen to, because I think that would be super interesting.
That's a good point. Because in the series, they just use that to justify the PSYOPs attack, right? Like Decker uses it to convince Prince to like do something, not just wait around.
Yeah, I think this conversation was in the 6th, right? Because they used the conversation of like, let's just have a glass of milk. They're like, see, that's proof that they don't care about those kids.
Yeah.
So we got to do something more, because this is proof that they're abusing those kids in there. To give them some kind of fit. But you're right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they put those listening devices in the milk cartons, and the milk cartons went into the kitchen, and not a lot of really heavy conversations happen in the kitchen. So, at least
I also think that they disposed of the milk cartons when the milk went bad. So I don't know if the bugs went with them.
Because I think the bugs were in the crate, is what they said.
Oh, were they?
Yeah,
that's probably true.
Oh, they kept the bottles in the docuseries. They kept the milk bottles. They poured them out and then put them on the shelf.
Oh, that's right, with water, huh? I remember that now. Yeah, I'd be interested to know. I know they mentioned them at least once, but I can't. Who knows what they did with them?
I would say that another conversation that happened. I'm pretty sure during this this episode, is they brought in the milk and then they cut off the power and the milk went bad. And that was another situation where they had discussed, like, you say you want things to be peaceful, but you're not doing that with your actions. And of course, there's another side to that, hey, we had agreements that you're not pulling through with either. But that was definitely something that I felt for the Davidians, that they're like, you gotta show us that you're willing to, that you actually do want to do things peacefully, because from your actions, it seems like you don't care what happens to us, and so I could feel for them in that sentiment.
All right, let's move on to the final episode. So the synopsis is: the attorneys visit with David Koresh and his followers to discuss the case at hand and options. From there, it looks like the stalemate is coming to a conclusion, but Koresh asks Gary Nosner over the phone to let him write out the 7 seals before he and his group submit themselves. Nosner agrees. However, Tony Prince and Mitch Decker see it as a stall tactic and remove Nosner from the premises. Later, tactical agents are given the green light to use tanks to penetrate Mount Carmel and inject CS gas as a method to lure out the sect members. That only does the exact opposite, as Steve issues gas masks and Koresh relocates his family and followers to the bunker. Suddenly, a fire starts within the complex, gradually engulfing the wooden structure in flames. A few more Davidians, including Thibodeau, escape and surrender to authorities, who promptly arrest them. While the 76 that remain in the burning compound, including Koresh and the children, perish from the smoke inhalation, mercy killings, or sacrifice, bringing the 51-day-long standoff to a tragic end and forever changing the lives of those involved.
This episode was like super hard for me, because I think at this point Javier was like, I have to look up to see what happens, and I was like, no, don't. And I was like, no, don't. Let's just watch and see what happens. We can look up supplemental stuff after. And at this point, especially when they brought in the lawyers, I was hoping for, and at that point kind of expecting, that they were going to come to some really unique resolution, where they all went out and things, they go to jail for a little bit, but they get justice for the things that were wrong on the side of the ATF, and so that's what I was kind of expecting. And then when the tear gas and everything went down, it was like an emotional roller coaster, just like total, like crashed into the ground. Like I was not so fully not expecting that to happen, that it was a super emotional episode for me.
Yeah, it was hard to watch. I mean, our story, like any type of story that ends that way, or experience or event, it was rough. I struggled watching this episode. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was a hard one to watch, hard one to swallow. The culmination of everything that was going on that was wrong on both sides, just batshit, stuff.
I can share what went through my brain during this episode, and I would preface with, again, as we've talked about, understand that this may not portray exactly how it happened, but just as far as this narrative, this story of the docuseries, this is what my thoughts were. Number one, they heard, and then you guys, if you remember it differently, you can correct me, because it's been, maybe a week or two, but they heard that conversation in the milk cartons, and we're like, that's it. That's going to be our catalyst. We're going to go all the way up to, who was it? The Secretary of Treasury, or not Treasury, or somebody, that lady in DC,
the Attorney General.
The Attorney General, and they were like, we believe they're abusing kids, and we want to use tear gas on them. And she's like, but won't that hurt the kids? And they're like, I mean, like, they're going to tear up a little bit. That's why it's called tear gas. But the parents are going to take one look at their kids and they're just going to run right out. And it's better to hurt them for a second than to leave them in there being abused by these people. And she's like, if you're sure, and they're like, we're sure. She's like, all right. And she just signs the paper. And I was like, lady, are you a freaking idiot? You don't just sign off on tear gas to like throw at kids' faces without giving somebody else, get a second opinion, give somebody else a call. You hear from you call the negotiator, you call everybody who's been involved in that, and you make sure that is the right decision, because she is not qualified for her job if she doesn't understand how dangerous that using this gas is. So whether or not that happened, just to, take their word for it and sign that paper was extraordinarily frustrating to me. Also, that it seemed that their motivation for doing that was that they just got tired of waiting, which is a garbage reason. They just got tired of waiting. And so that was a huge frustration to me. Then when things started to go south and Gary was there at the crossroads again of you could do something, but he didn't. He was just like, I'm mad and you shouldn't do this. And then he just went home and watched the TV. That was a major disappointment to me. And I was like, you freaking call the Attorney General right now and you say, my name is Gary Nosner. I am the hostage negotiator. I've been in this business forever. You should not do this. I have worked with these people closely and this is not the best way to go. So maybe he did in real life, but in the story he didn't. And that was extraordinarily frustrating. And of course, I'm sure all of us felt the same way when we watched all of those children die. So that it was extraordinarily emotional for me, especially having my own child, putting my shoes in, what was her name? Sarah, who had the little girl that Thibodeau married.
Oh, Michelle.
Watching her, they all retreated to the, that little storage area, safe.
The bus thing or
the vault.
Bunker.
The vault. Yeah, so they were in the vault and her holding her child as she just slipped away unconscious was so horrible for me to watch, having my own child and imagining that happened to me. And again, whether or not this actually happened, those women in the docuseries and those children, they were trying so hard to get out, but they were trapped because of the way that the ATF destroyed that building in the process of using that gas. So they targeted the vault and in doing so trapped them in it and they all died. And so that was really difficult for me to watch and really, really hard for me to hold back thoughts of I want to see every single one of those ATF agents in jail. And if they're not, I'm going to find their social medias and I'm going to cyberbully them to death. We tried. It didn't work though.
Surprisingly, ATF agents from the 90s aren't on Facebook.
Weird.
Well, that's why they changed their name for productions like this. Little wackos like you can't Facebook stalk them.
Yeah, that was definitely a hard episode to watch.
I think it's it's one of those things. This is where a lot of diversion goes. That there's no way to know the truth beyond once the raid starts. I talked in the last episode that when we talked about there's two things that we'll never know ever. And that is, the first one was who shot first. The second one is, how did this fire start? If you read anything that has to do with anything from law enforcement and the government, it's, the Branch Davidians, they believe that the Branch Davidians started it from the inside. If you listen to any of the surviving Branch Davidians, none of them actually wanted to die. And so it was started by the tear gas that was placed in, which is a highly flammable compound. So it's a tough thing, but we'll never know which one was which. I think what I do believe, and I think they tried to portray it with Decker losing his shit, trying to get the older sister out of the back of the bus and realizing that all of these kids were actually going to die. I think, he has this moment of just pure heartbreak where he realized that, everyone in there is going to die now. And I'm sure in his mind, or what they're trying to portray is in that character's mind, or the conflagration of those multiple people that were involved, maybe making those decisions, realized that they thought that this was started from the inside, that what they'd done could not have started that, whatever. It doesn't matter at this point. What matters is there have to be people somewhere along the line that have regret for how it was played out. And then, it's a hindsight's 2020 kind of situation. Hopefully, on both sides for those that are still around and involved, but history repeats itself situation for the rest of us. If we look at a situation like this, on both sides of the coin, hopefully we can learn some lessons from this absolutely bonkers tragedy that took place.
Dude, the whole who started the fire thing is almost maybe just as confusing as who started shooting first, right? Because when I first watched it and first read part of the DOJ report, I was like convinced that the police started it on accident, right? Like I don't think they meant to, but they did pour tear gas in there, and then they used flashbangs, which are considered incendiary. So something like that could have started a fire. But then you also read like the coroner's report, coroner's report, and like a lot of the Davidians did kill themselves. So like if the narrative is like they started this fire with the intention of killing themselves, there's at least a little bit of proof to show that these Davidians didn't try to get out. Instead, they killed themselves and they killed their kids and stuff like that. Maybe it was a mixture of both. I don't know. But that one is really interesting to me.
I agree with Javier there, where like I don't know what to think because of all the different information there is, where there's Davidians who have killed themselves, there's the flashbang stuff that he talked about, it just feels like something doesn't line up, and it's hard for me to reconcile that.
Yeah.
It is a tough thing when you read how many people had bullet wounds in the head.
Well, somewhere, again, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what source this was, so it could be wrong, but I even read that some of them had stab wounds.
Yeah, that came straight out of the DOJ report.
Yeah, it would just...
Which you don't know how truthful it is because it's the government, but it's what we've got.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was just thinking, so I think Javier can attest to this, that in day-to-day life, I'm the person who says, when Javier's like, look at this video of this cop being crazy. I'm like, well, that guy obviously provoked that cop. And I'm usually one to say, don't provoke law enforcement. They have a hard enough job as is. They definitely, should be not abusing people no matter what. But I'm usually day to day in favor of supporting law enforcement because their job is hard. But no matter what the truth is for me, whether all of those people killed themselves or they were killed in that fire, would that have happened if the ATF were there? Would all of those people be dead if they were not in that situation? And even if those people were at risk of killing themselves and killing their children, that's not the ATF's jurisdiction. ATF does not fall under their umbrella. So for me, at the end of the day, I definitely place a lot of blame, no matter what the truth is. And I feel like I can have this opinion because we're never going to know the truth, because, it's just like we've talked about, so difficult. But for me, I feel like even if this was like local law enforcement or people were there for the right reasons and they had the right jurisdiction to be there, that it's law enforcement's job to handle things in an appropriate way and in a protect and serve kind of way, not we need to show everyone that we are more powerful than these people, and if it comes down to it, we're going to kill everyone here.
I mean, it is the police's job to de-escalate situations.
De-escalation,
right?
which is not what the priority was.
We can hold them to that standard at the very least.
At the very least.
They should be de-escalating things. And I even think going into this last episode, this was still salvageable. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Absolutely.
You still could have done something. Like I don't know if it was you, Ian, or Mattson that mentioned last time, like maybe pull everyone back and go and walk to the front door with a small group of people, right? Or something. Like there must have been some way to reasonably talk this through. And maybe not with Koresh, but at least with what was his right-hand man's name?
Steve.
At least with Steve.
If the goal was to get people out so that we can avoid people dying, in that sea of people there's got to be one person who could think of a more creative solution than what happened.
I think that's what made the last episode so hard, is they were close to, or at least the episode portrays that they were close to some sort of like final.
Yeah. Yep.
He writes his manuscript and we'll come out, like the lawyers got involved. And so it gives you this hope of like, yeah, there's still a way that this can be resolved peacefully. And then for it to end the way it does is just really difficult and frustrating. And yeah.
It's another piece, too, where I got really mad at David Koresh.
Yes.
The man has a chance. All you got to do is send out a couple of pages, man.
Yeah.
Just a couple of damn pages. It's not, look, swallow. And this is, it goes back to just like I talked about last week, where all he had to do was keep his word and say, look, I'm sorry that these people didn't hear my message and they didn't like what I had to say and they made fun of me. Your pride gets in the way. Just like this, I can't share 2 pages without the rest of it because you won't understand it. He's not trying to understand it, dude. He's trying to get you out and trying to give something so that his people have a chance to see that they're making progress in this peaceful resolution.
Yeah.
And the fact that he refused, I can't argue with the fact that you're like, look, and especially now that I've read some research where there were literally hundreds of times that they tried to make concessions and then he said they'll come out and then they changed their minds because it wasn't the actual sign of God. Like, it's interesting research to hear how much they tried and how many times he said yes and then no. So that flip to, I was like, man, it's as much on him to swallow his pride in that situation and go, you can't stay there when you've agreed to come out. Of course they're going to be pissed. Of course they're going to look at that and go, this guy's lied to us 100 times before. He's not willing to even send 2 pages out to show that he's making progress. I don't believe he's coming out. So that was a hard one for me to swallow when he just refused to send out a couple pages.
Honestly, I understood like Prince's reaction to that. And I didn't even know that they agreed to come out several times. Just even after the first time, I'm like, really, Koresh, you really think they're gonna believe you a second time when you say, all I want to do is just this one thing and then we'll all come out? Like, you burnt that bridge, man. You don't get any more leeway.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a tough one. And I think that's where for me, this situation was such a shitty deal on both. And I keep going back to both sides, but I do agree. I think that there were plenty of opportunities for a much more peaceful resolution and a less tragic and deadly resolution on either side if both sides would have just swallowed some level of pride, right? At least according to what we see in the show. And that's also to say, the big negotiator is Gary Nosner and is the one little Weasley guy that was with him, when in actuality there were multiple negotiators there at all times because they had to be able to man the phones 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of rotating
like
in and out.
50 of them or something?
Yeah, it was a pretty astounding number. So, but we get one perspective, maybe 2. So there's definitely some room for, misinterpretation there. But either way, a lot of things were done on both sides to create a terrible situation and make it worse.
I think, JJ, and I think this was you who said in either this past episode or this episode or the previous episode that, there was a lot done, a lot of pride and, in retrospect, horrible decisions made on both sides, the leadership of both sides. And I think, and I've kind of said this before, but I think the documentary does a really good job at, I think, for even the ATF side, showing that the majority of the people who were involved in this incident were not the ones making the decisions. They were the ones who felt that they needed to follow the leader of their group. And so I think the documentary did a really good job of reminding the viewers that it maybe seemed like there were 2 extremes, but really this entire scenario on both sides was just full of real people who are just trying to do their best with the things that they knew.
Man, so much that went on. So much. So, should we wrap up, give our what we thought of this thing thoughts and rate it?
Let's do it.
Yes.
All right. Javier, let's start with you.
Okay. 1 through 5, right?
Yep.
As much as like the story frustrates me, I really liked the series. It was really captivating and it was well acted. And I'm going to give it a 4.
Cool.
And would I watch it again? I don't think so. It's heavy. It's so heavy and it's so frustrating and it's heartbreaking. So I probably won't, unless Nicole wants to watch it again, which I don't think she does.
No.
With that, it's a good segue into Nicole. How would you rate this?
I'm really similar. As a whole, I think the documentary was filmed, acted really well. I think that characters were really, I've already used this word, captivating. This documentary, episode 1, sucked me in. I wanted to see how it happened, and there were really no parts for me that were slow or that were, I felt like, unnecessary to the story. Just from start to finish, I was just eyes glued. So I would give it at least a 4, maybe even a 4.5, just based on how well I felt like it was done. And I'm no movie critic, but I'm a normal person, and this normal person was eyes glued the whole time. But I would not watch it again because I cannot watch babies die. And would I recommend it to someone? I would, but I would say I would feel like I would need to spoil the ending before I would recommend it. Because like, if you're okay watching babies die, then it's worth it to watch. But I would never watch it again just for that ending part. But it was an extraordinarily captivating docuseries.
Definitely. Ian.
This is a hard one to rate because I have a lot of mixed feelings about a lot of different elements. But when it comes down to how well it was done, the acting, this has kind of already been mentioned by both Nicole and Javier already, but it was really, really well done. It sucks you in, and you want to, even though this is something like you can go Google or you can read up on or that you live through, it's something that you want to sit through and watch till the end, and you want to see how everything plays out. With that said, I'm kind of in JJ's camp. I don't really like the docuseries format and stuff, but based on how this was done, and as far as like looking at it from an entertainment standpoint, like I can get on board with it. I'll say it. This is hard. I can do a 4 for that. I can do a 4. So.
Cool. I'll wrap up. For me, this is one of those things where I'm kind of in with everybody else. For me, I try to look at it. I think I told Ian this once. We were having a conversation after the first episode because it was so challenging, and there was, tensions get high. There's a lot of crazy things going on because, it really draws a line in the sand to a certain degree on where do you stand? Do you stand on one side? Do you stand on the other? And so for me, I like to look at it from an artistic point of view. So if I back away from the realistic nature of what was happening and the fact that it was a real show, or not a real show, sorry, but a real situation that happened, and I think of it from entertainment, it was fantastic. Visually, it was stunning. The acting was as good as I've seen, period, in a long, long time. So, I can go back and just be really, really appreciative of the artistic nature of this. The part that I do struggle with is, I'm with Ian. I have a hard time with anything because I know that there's facts that are being challenged and misconstrued because of the artistic nature, and the fact that there are facts that we'll never know because of the nature of the situation. So a lot to think about in that. But for me, I'm going to go right along with the rest of the group. I think it's a 4. Beautifully put together show, very thought-provoking, very evocative in a lot of different ways. So I really enjoyed it. Would I watch it again? No, I don't know. I may watch pieces for the acting. Like the conversation, the one that really sticks out to me is there's a conversation between Nosner and Decker when they're sitting there. Decker's trying to eat lunch or dinner or something, and Nosner tries to come and talk to him, and they're kind of going at it. They lay out their perspectives, right? Decker's like, look, there's 40 human beings to every one of us as a police force. And, we have to, if we don't show that we're the force, then we look weak, and then everybody thinks they can attack. And then on the flip side, Nosner saying, yeah, but people are people, and we have to respect the human nature of what's going on. That conversation, like I would sit and watch again because it's two giants just acting their asses off. And I really love to watch that. But when I watch it as a whole, no, it's just too much for me. It was hard. It brings up too many emotions, gets me too worked up. So yeah, there's my thing.
I think it gets us
cool.
all worked up a little bit.
Yeah, I think both episodes are proof of that, right? Both of these have, there's some fire and brimstone running around because we just get that emotion going, and it's how it works.
Let's go back to watching John Wick and shit like that. It's
simple. Yeah, I know, right?
Times.
Kind of looking forward to Wednesday's movie because, man, it's either going to be, at this point with the voting, it's either going to be Scoob or it's going to be Jojo Rabbit. So
I would not I would be okay with both of those, to be honest.
Yeah, and I was laughing because it's those two are way out in front in the lead in voting, and it's really close between those two. But I'm excited because they're both much more lighthearted, even though Jojo Rabbit does cover some pretty heavy themes when you get down to it. But it's very lighthearted, which I'm going to be appreciative after this series and talking about it. So yeah, so everyone, don't forget you can find us wherever fine podcasts are found, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find us on YouTube now. By the way, we're doing trailer reactions. Probably start seeing some of our episodes in a really cool animated form soon too, as well. So keep an eye out for that on YouTube. But as far as podcasts go, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, I already said, but Spotify, Stitcher. Again, anywhere you can find podcasts, that's where we're at. You can also request a movie or a TV show, hosts at what'sourverdict.com. Again, I reminded you at the beginning, but check out our sister podcast, What's Our Verdict Movies. That's what we're talking about. We're probably going to be watching either Scoob or Jojo Rabbit coming up next. So go check that out if you have any interest and want to hear what we think about those movies. With that being said, I think we've hit the end of Waco. So we'll go ahead and close out. Thank Nicole for joining us. We appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye now.
Cinemagic out.